Hey guys, it's Amen, and I'm gonna teach you how to edit a picture and make it look all cute and stuff. So this is Chris Kelly, my friend. He's in my grade, pretty cute, pretty sexy. And now I'm gonna show you guys, I'm essentially bring you guys to Lightroom, teach you how to use all these things on the side that you see me scrolling with right now, and how to make a picture like look flat and stuff, and make it pop, and make sure everything looks nice. So first I'm going to walk you through Lightroom. The temperature bar, this is the white balance. How everything is kind of tinted like the feeling you get. So if you bring it to the left, you get that cool sensation. And if you bring it to the right, you get that nice warm sensation. So we're actually going to want this picture to be warm because when you're editing the picture, you want to give it a mood. And the mood for this picture is depending on where you took it and how the conditions were when you took it. I actually took this, well, I guess it's yesterday now. It's 1 in the morning for today. So I took this on Sunday, the 22nd. I know I'm a little late with this project, but it's okay. So that's what the temperature bar does. It pretty much sets the tone for your image. Now the tint bar I don't really mess with too often, but these two colors, like blue and yellow, and not in real life, but in Lightroom, they're opposites, right? And same with green and magenta. So this tint bar, if you ever if you have images that involve these two colors, or even, you just want to get a little bit more magenta in there than normal, kind of like that, because magenta does kind of add a warm tone, you can mess with the tint. And the exposure, it's pretty simple. You could either make your picture look stupid or stupid. And I don't really mess with this bar too much because it adds a lot of grain and noise. If you zoom in, you could see a lot of noise being added to the photo. Not a lot, but a decent amount when you up the exposure every stop. And a stop is 1 point. So this is 1.4 stops. This is like pretty much 2 stops, and you'll see like the picture, like the quality has degraded when you up the exposure. So I only do that in very tiny amounts if I really underexpose the photo in camera, and I try not to. And then the second bar contrast, everyone, just makes the colors pop out a little bit more, but it also makes the colors darker. So usually when you mess with contrast, you have to mess with exposure a little bit, and that's why the bars are right next to each other. So I'm gonna set these back because we'll edit the photo after I walk you through everything. Highlights, it's the bright part in the photo. So like that part, they're like the popping, like the whites and the bright yellows, bright oranges and stuff. Shadows are all the shadows in the image. So if you lower it, all these stuff down there where the light doesn't necessarily hit. So if you ever want to know what a bar does, you pretty much just mess with it. The whites and the highlights are very similar. They're the whites, and whites are highlights. So essentially, these two bars do the same thing, but this is a little more specific than that. And the blacks, all the blacks in the image. Again, pretty simple. Clarity, it adds pop and detail to your image. So if you lower it, you see everything got a lot more smoother, kind of like a silky smooth background. And then if you up it a lot of detail and a lot of noise, like I was talking about earlier, all those little dots, grain. Vibrance, the vibration, the vibrance of the colors, how much they pop, and the saturation, how much color you're actually pumping into it. So you don't want to mess with these bars too much because it looks a little stupid if you do that. Now the tone curve is very complicated. It's essentially after you do, so you can only mess with highlights this much, right? So this is on, you can't bring it up any less. You can't bring it up any more, and you can't bring it down any less. But let's say I up these highlights to 100, and I want to even brighten them up more. That's when I go to the tone curve, and then I could really bust open those highlights in the tone curve. But I don't really. The tone curve is for a completely other. I would need an entire video just to explain how to use the tone curve. So we're just gonna go over that very briefly, and then we're gonna bring us to the color bar. So the hue is essentially the opposites, like I was talking about earlier. Not necessarily opposites, but more of like what this program could take colors and morph them into. So you see this magenta, I could turn it into a more purple, or I could turn it into a more red. You'll see the very slight change there, but let's see, this yellow. You can see the color changing in there to more of like a green to more of an orange along the side right there. So that's pretty much what the hue does. Now saturation is the same thing that this bar does, but this is by color. So if I really want these oranges and yellows to pop out, I could up in that. And if I don't want any magenta, boom. And I don't want any purple, boom. And now that turns gray. So this is really when you become more advanced, this slider becomes very relevant because when you're editing a photo, each person essentially gets a style. I feel like a style is definitely the best way to put it. And this color bar is where you put your style because, especially if you're posting on Instagram and you're scrolling through that grid, you want to see. I suck at this. You'll see the same colors repeating itself through every image, regardless of what it is. Mine looks nothing. It looks awful. My grid looks awful. But when you see people who are really good at photography, their grids they match and everything just like flows together, and it looks really nice. pretty much if I see someone with a nice grid, I'm following them because I want to learn how to get that nice grid. Next, we're going to go to luminance. This is how bright or how dark your colors are. So like this orange, if I really want to darken up those oranges and give it more like taste and substance, then I'll lower it. But if I really want to brighten it up, boom. And that kind of, again, over exaggerates the highlights. So I'll have to go into highlights and I'll lower that down a little bit. It's all, imagine like a teeter-totter thing at the playground, like all balancing it out in the middle. Like if you do one thing, it'll raise it too much, and then on the other side, you got to lower it down to even it out. And then we're going to go next to split toning. Split toning, it's a very particular tool. So remember what I was talking about, the highlights earlier, like these are the highlights. You could change the colors of the highlights. So let's say I want to make the highlights red. Now everything that's highlighted in the picture is red. And I could change this color to anything I want using the hue slider, or I can go into the color grid, and then I could change the saturation of the red. So if you just want a very slight bit of red, you do it like that. And then if you want to see what it looks like without split toning, boom, and with, boom. So you can see that very slight bit of red that I added into the image. And now if we go to shadows, it's the same thing. All the shadows, we're going to change them to blue this time. And then we're going to mess with the saturation, and then boom, boom. We're going to put these back to normal. And if you double click anything, it'll just set it back to normal. Now, this is the detail of the image, sharpening. I don't really mess with sharpening too much, but if you want, you could definitely go in and pixel peep and up the sharpening, and you'll see that the image, you can't really notice the difference, but it does add a lot of noise, so default is good for 25. And now masking, this is a very good tool because essentially if you hit the Alt key on your keyboard, unless you're doing this on a Mac, I think it's a different key, but I don't really know. You hit Alt and then you mess this, and everything that's black will not be sharpened, so there won't be any noise. So you only want to sharpen the subject, which is Chris in this scenario. So I take the masking, I hit Alt, and I slide it until everything that's black, I don't want sharpened. Everything that's white, I do want sharpened. So I want, the qualities on his face sharpened, and I don't want to waste my noise, because you do need some noise in the image to give it some detail. That's why your clarity bar never goes down to -100, because then it just looks stupid. But you want some noise, but you don't want it on the background. Like this is irrelevant. Like you don't care about this. It adds a little substance, but that's not what you're looking at. Like you're looking at Chris. So we're going to go down to the next section. Noise reduction, pretty much the more luminance you add. Essentially 100 luminance is like -100 clarity. It just smooths everything out, like you can tell, and then boom, a little bit more detail. Not as extreme as clarity, but a little bit. Color, this is color noise reduction. I never mess with this. I don't really know what it does. I think it's if color creates noise, it lowers it, but I don't think anyone ever messes with that. And then the next one, this is before you edit every photo, you always want to do this. Chromatic aberration is when the colors create a little bit of a pixel that is damaged in an image, and it happens all the time. I can't find one right now, but yeah, I always check it out. And profile corrections, when you shoot, a lens always has a natural warp to it, and this knows what lens I shot it with. I shot it with a Nikon AFS DX 35mm 1.8. And so if I disable it, you could see like a little vignette in the corners, and if I enable it, the vignette goes away. And you could also mess with the vignette. Is it down here? Yeah, proscope vignette. I could add or I could decrease. I don't really ever mess with this stuff. And so we're gonna go right back up to transform. Now, if I can, I could do some. Yeah, I don't ever mess with that. But if you take a photo and it's tilted and you want to make it look straight, auto, and it just straightens out your photo for you. And there's another way to do that as well. If you go up here to crop, you can hit auto, and it'll angle your photo, but I don't really need to do that, so we're just going to hit done. I guess I straighten that out a little bit, whatever. Alright, we're going to go down to the camera calibration. Now, this is if you want a certain color trend in your pictures. I don't really ever use this. Like, you could see it really changes up the colors. I don't really like that too much, so I tend to stray away from this bar and this bar. And the grain, now, the grain I was talking about, this is essentially noise and what I was trying to avoid in my previous ones. But if you're going for a certain style, like I actually was in a couple pictures that I added earlier, you kind of want to add that grainy look. You never want to go up to 100, but sometimes you do want to go up to like 10, 20 to add that look, like it was shot on film, like kind of like the old school like look. And if you are going for that, grain helps. Now we're going to go up here. This is your crop tool. So if you ever want to crop an image, do whatever, you just do it here. And also if you want to straighten out the image, after you're done, you click done. This is a spot removal. So let's say I want to get rid of that nasty looking little blemish. I click it, and then boom, and it's gone. Like, I know it looks kind of stupid at the moment, but it really depends. Like, there's no good place to put it, but that's what it does. And you right click, you can either clone, and now that blemish is gone. But again, you could see that circle. So if you do see that circle, you want to feather, so it gradually fixes it. And then you zoom in, Feather? Okay. It's still there. Uh, we're just going to pretend like I didn't. Okay. Goodbye. Next, red eye corrections. If you got red eyes, you just get rid of them. I've never actually had to use this before because it's 2018, and if you have red eyes in a picture, you probably are using a camera from 1982. So, next, a graduated filter. These I use a lot. So let's go to a different picture to show you an example. Let's go to this picture right here. Now this one wasn't a keeper, kind of looks stupid, but as you can see, the sky is very blown out. So what a graduated filter does, boom, and now I could just up there is what I'm editing. And it's similar to radial filter, but it's good to do on skies. So this is obviously an over exaggeration, but you can do all these things on the side with your graduated filter. And boom, it'll, if you do it correctly, it'll look good, but it's essentially you're editing a certain part of a photo going vertical. Excuse me. And now we're going to go back down to this photo, back to develop. This radial filter, you make a circle and everything, if originally when you do it, unless you click invert, everything on the outside of the filter. And if you click invert, everything on the inside of the filter gets impacted. And this is good if you're taking a portrait and everything else is well lit except for your subject's face. So you could light the subject's face up using this radial filter or the adjustment brush. And the adjustment brush is you can do everything you want, but it depends on where you brush. Let's say I want to brighten up his face. I draw over his face a little bit, and then I up the exposure, and you can see his face gets brightened up. It's a lot easier to do the radial filter if you're doing faces. The brush is usually what I use if I'm doing a broad area where I can't really mess up on. So for instance, if I go to this image and I just want to do the sky, I want to do something with the sky. So I click this, and then I could just brush over the sky, and very easily, like, I can't really mess up. Like, I'm not, like, pixel peeping, essentially. I'm not being perfect. We're just gonna delete that, though. Okay, back to this picture. Now we're gonna edit this picture. Okay, this is the picture after I edited it. This is the picture before I edited it. Looks a lot better, a lot more detail, a lot more vibrant colors. And I would show you how I edited it, but I don't want to make this like a 20-minute video where you sit through half the period watching something you don't really care about. So, a quick do-over, I lowered the highlights, and then I upped the luminance so the colors they were bright, and they had a lot of substance to them. I added a lot of detail to his face, so this is make sure that you know this is the subject. I blurred out the background in camera, even though I wasn't using the correct lens for portrait photography. I was using like a short landscape lens, like a 35mm. So that's why the background isn't as blurred out as I'd like it to be. And also because he was very close to the kayaks, and the farther you are away, the more blurred out the background is. That's why the trees are a lot more blurred than the kayaks, because the trees are across the river while these kayaks are right behind them. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, even though you don't take pictures, nor do you probably have Lightroom, because it's expensive, but I cracked it, and that's because I'm a criminal. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.